I'm Jackie Demanis. I am the founder of Idea Citizen, and Ashley, my esteemed guest. I have a lot of respect for what you're doing. Atlassian, it's actually better known for a number of people as a SaaS company. I love some of your products. I know you have Jira. I'm personally a big fan of Trello. So Ashley is the head of lifestyle marketing. She is also now a published author. Her book is Human-Centered Marketing: How to Connect with Audiences in the Age of AI. It's available on Kindle right now, Amazon May 27th, so it's available for pre-order. And Barnes and Noble, I just put in the chat actually through your publisher with the discount promos and everything. So I'd say like take advantage of that. I want to start with something fun. You obviously have so many different things that are so interesting about you. Can you tell me the least interesting thing about you?
The least interesting thing about me, probably that I'd say, so this, I feel like this is like something that maybe every woman can relate to, and it's probably the number of times I change clothes in a day because I have my gym, I have my like pajamas, and then I have my gym outfit, and then I have my work from home outfit, and then I have my like comfy around the house outfit. But if I'm going to musical rehearsal, then I might have a musical rehearsal outfit that might actually be different than my around the house outfit. And then and then I have, I go back to jammies at the end of the day. And so my husband actually laughs. He's like, "Why do you have so many different outfits?" And I'm like, they each have a different purpose. Like, you don't wear your gym outfit around the house. It's dirty. It's got like gingers on it. So
I can
maybe
relate.
that's like the most interest or the least interesting thing
Yeah.
that
It's
everybody
like the
else
least
can relate
interesting,
to.
most interesting thing. I mean, that's hilarious, and it's so silly that, yeah. I mean, let's be honest. I think the majority of our days are consumed by less interesting things. I feel like it's the realness of it. I know that we're on LinkedIn. There's like this element of self promotion, and thank God. I mean, I think self promotion is a great thing. Thank God we have like a place that for us business people also that we can actually self promote a little bit more. And I'll say also as a woman, I find it a little bit easier to self promote on LinkedIn, and I think that kind of leads seamlessly actually into our conversation today. We're talking about thought leadership. We're on LinkedIn. There's a lot of people that are self proclaimed thought leaders. I think a lot of them aren't doing a very good job. I think some of them that don't claim themselves as thought leaders probably should. So you kind of have both of these camps. I tend to personally shy away from the terminology thought leader. I kind of consider myself thought curious, but I actually realize that kind of plays into like some of your framework that you've actually built out. So like in your opinion, what does thought leader really mean?
Yeah. So I actually love that term thought curious. That's so fun where it's like, I'm not a thought leader, I'm thought curious. And I joke that the first rule of thought leadership is kind of like the first rule of Fight Club, that like we don't talk about it. If you call yourself a thought leader, it's probably the first indication that you might not be a thought leader. So that's not necessarily true, but at its core, if you break it down to the two words, it's, thought leadership means you have to have thoughts and be a leader. And I think that the struggle with a lot of people who are declaring themselves to be thought leaders on LinkedIn are missing at minimum the have thoughts portion. And in a lot of cases, they might be missing the be a leader portion. And so when you actually break it down, you do have to be saying new things, innovative things. You have to be helping people think and act in a new direction. And you have to be doing that at scale. It's
Okay.
not enough to just think smart thoughts by yourself. It's also not enough to just have a big following. So, one of the things that I've done with my framework, I've outlined four pillars, and we'll get into those, but I'll give a little preview. It's credibility, profile, being prolific, and then strong depth of ideas. You can be very good at your job. You can be making a lot of money for yourself, your company, your team. But if you are not sharing, codifying, influencing externally, then you're missing that be a leader part of it. This is particularly true for like academics and scientists, right? Like they're doing a lot of really groundbreaking research. They have that strong depth of ideas, but they're missing the profile and prolific. On the flip side, you might have a lot of influencers who have a huge following, and yes, they have some credibility, but they're mainly talking about existing problems and solutions. And so they're high on that profile pillar, but they're quite low in depth of ideas. And so I think I think unfortunately a lot of people who are running around declaring themselves to be thought leaders are thinking they're a thought leader because they're doing smart things, but they have no following, or they have a high following, but they're not actually saying anything new or smart, and so they're out of whack on one or more of those pillars.
The thing that I think is interesting is that like I feel like this provides an opportunity to like audit yourself and in terms of opportunities to just like I mean enhance your marketability, credibility, whatever it may be and really think like because you may be really good at to your point like one of these pillars, but like if you have a goal and if your intent is like I think authorship, white papers, all these things that kind of go into like driving forward, I think yeah, it needs to be a little bit more well-rounded. And I also think like I mean just like Fight Club, I mean, you don't really talk about it, but also you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with some of these things and actually like credibly ask yourself these questions. And maybe it's just because I've gotten older, but like thought leadership as a concept, or maybe it's because, internet and just the adoption over, the decades. Has this always been a thing or is this new?
I think it's been a thing. The term itself was actually coined around 40 years ago. In gosh, what is that? It would be like the late 80s, early 90s. It was when the term thought leader was actually coined. But this idea of people saying smart things and building an audience that listens to them and follows them has been around for a very long time. It's taken different shapes if you look at, religion, philosophy, Barnum and Bailey's circus, right? Like that was a new concept, this idea that we're going to gather all of these people with all of these random skills and random looks and we're going to put them all in this big tent and that was a very innovative thing to do at the time and obviously it attracted a lot of ridicule and a lot of audiences and curiosity, right? So I think it's been around for a very long time. It's taken different forms. I think in its current form, the reason that it has become kind of this buzzword that has a lot of baggage
Yeah,
is because of the lower barrier to entry on social media and to be able to spread ideas at scale. You can self-publish books. Anyone can launch a podcast. You don't even need a good mic to do that. You literally need internet and a phone and you can launch, a podcast or a video series and reach thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. And so the merit of the ideas and the engagement of the audience starts to get very blurry when you can do this at scale for a very low barrier to entry. And I think that's where things have kind of gotten off the rails. Um, and I think that now people are starting to realize that, like, wait, just because you can say
yeah.
something very loud to a lot of people, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the credibility to say it. Some people, again, we talk about watching a train wreck where you can't look away. The train wreck is
They're
not thought
everywhere.
right? Like it's got a big audience,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
attracting an audience,
yeah,
but it's not smart. And same thing too, like a lot of founders or executives, particularly at large companies, are able to build large followings based on their title. They may have a
sure.
big profile,
Yeah.
but I think we would all agree that sharing the company earnings updates, like that's not thought leadership. Sharing that you acquired a company or you're sunsetting a product, we all know that's not thought leadership. And yet it
Yeah.
gets high reach and it might be said by someone with a big title. And so that's where you start to see that you actually need all four of those pillars. And there are a variety of different types of creators and people who can add a lot of value, but that doesn't necessarily make them thought leaders. And thought leadership builds trust and drives different outcomes than a subject matter expert or an influencer or a company executive who is not one of those things. They drive different outcomes and that's why it matters. It's not just semantics. It does impact your overall marketing mix, how you measure things, your time horizons, and how you think about that with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I love the democratization of information. I think that I do feel like a kinship with that, with the idea citizen group and just kind of people, again, back to the fact, it's like, people self-publishing, people doing like their thing and then getting their information out. But, and whether it be to a group of 500 or 5,000, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. But it's like you are I guess forging a path to get there. I do think one of the things I've been quite disappointed in recently is like, I don't know, I feel like we're a little upside down with like also like garnering authority or knowledge based on, how do I say this? There's so many times I say like cementing things around like somebody being a billionaire or somebody accomplishing something from like a monetary perspective that for whatever reason now like makes them an authority on something. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but I'm not saying that it's true. It's like the one true thing of, let's call it, a billionaire is that they have a lot of money. Beyond that, like everything else is is different. And like you could have earned your money by yourself. You could have leveraged existing products, but like that doesn't necessarily make you a thought leader either. But like I feel like these things kind of get conflated over time. And I also think that like these bigger names, these bigger personas, I do feel like there's a responsibility that I don't think is really being taken seriously. And I'm not really sure how to articulate it, but I feel like you've thought about this a lot more than I have. But like as a thought leader or, shepherding any sort of thought leadership, like is there a responsibility or like a code of ethics that there maybe should be pertaining to like what people are saying and doing and sharing at large scale? And honestly my head goes a little Joe Rogan because like I feel like there's like no fact checking there, and I wouldn't even consider him necessarily a thought leader, but the platform that he has, like, I question things. So what are your thoughts?
I don't think a code of ethics exists. I do think that maybe it should, or we should have a responsibility, particularly if you are a thought leader, if you are pushing net new ideas, you're trying to disrupt the status quo, you're saying that old playbooks or frameworks don't work, you need to base that on something. And I think, particularly in the age of AI, where it's a lot harder to distinguish facts from fiction. It's a lot harder to build that trust. It's a lot harder to find people who you can trust. If you are someone that has built that trust with an audience, I do think you have a responsibility to maintain that trust.
Yeah.
Um, and it does get very blurry, right? Like, just because something is no longer working for you doesn't mean that it's not working for the entire industry or that the thing that's working for you will work for everyone else. And this is a big area where a lot of people get it wrong from that depth of ideas perspective. One of the biggest inputs to improving in depth of ideas is having the time to do research, test, experiment, codify it, put it out in a way that somebody else can test, do that research, shape it, give you that input and say, yes, this works, no, this doesn't work, right? I don't think that in business we have to have the same level of rigor as the scientific or academic
Yeah,
community
the
for us to
implications are
do.
definitely
There's
different.
there's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
And the harm in business is a different threshold of harm than particularly in science and medicine, where you might kill someone if you do this incorrectly, right? Like that's a different standard of stakes than most businesses. But if something only works for you in your very controlled environment with your very specific set of choices, it's probably not actually a decent framework or a decent methodology, right? And so that's something with my frameworks. I call them frameworks. I don't call them rules. And I get a lot of people, they'll ask me, like, I need to know this exact thing. Should I do this or this? And I'm like, listen, this is a framework. It requires your input, your context, and your perspective. Because while I have tested it and I have worked with, a number of different problems and people and companies, and I think that this works very well, and I have seen it work for people other than me, I can't tell you that like there's one right way to do things and it's the only right way, right? And so I think you should be skeptical of anyone telling you there is, one right way for all time to do every single thing. Like most things require some context,
Yeah.
and I do agree with you that when you put ideas out into the world saying, here's my credentials, here's how I tested this, here's the conclusion I came to, here's the results, therefore you should test it out and see how this works for you, right? And taking that feedback, that I think is that continuous process, particularly on the business side. Again, academia, science, medicine, that's not my area of expertise, but particularly on the business side of things, that feedback loop is key.
So let me so I guess part of the, you've built out this framework. I feel like I mean, can I say that you're a thought leader on this framework and everything, or at least like in terms of like your own criteria?
Sure. So I get this question a lot. Am I a thought leader on thought leadership? And according to my own framework, I would not rate myself as a thought leader. I do not score high enough on particularly the profile pillar. I also don't score high enough on the depth of ideas pillar. So the way the depth of ideas pillar works, at the lowest level, it's really iterating on tactics and basically kind of solving the same problem maybe with slightly new tactics, but it's primarily in existing problems and solutions. In the middle level, it's thinking about new strategies. It might be applying new strategy or tactics from adjacent fields to your problem. It might also have a little bit of new problem discovery in there. And then obviously at the highest level, you're pioneering, you're looking in new problem spaces, you're discovering new solution spaces, right? I would say that I'm basically kind of in that like tactical, strategic level of that depth of ideas pillar with the work that I'm doing. Um, I'm not just out discovering brand new problems that nobody has ever seen before, right? The solutions that I put forward are not so revolutionary that no one's ever heard of them, right? Like I am not the first person to explore this problem space or put forward solutions for it. So that I'm not strong enough in the depth of ideas pillar. And then from a profile standpoint, I'm in the middle of that. I have, I think, decent peer level recognition and decent industry level recognition, but um, I'm not, the main stage keynote at a variety of different industry conferences. I'm not in tier one outlets. I'm not sought out for like the highest level of podcasts, right? I don't have hundreds of thousands of followers on LinkedIn, right? All of those kind of go
Not
together. And
yet.
so not yet,
Not,
not yet. I think
yeah.
this is one thing that I think is unfortunate. When I talk about this and I say this about myself, people think I'm being self-deprecating. And I'm like, no, I'm quite confident in what I'm
Yeah.
saying and the framework that I've built and like what I'm doing with myself in terms of, publishing and showing up on LinkedIn and speaking on stages. Like none of being low in any of the pillars is not a shaming thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a self-worth thing. Like factually, where are you? If you want to grow and these are your goals, what do you need to do? Where do you need to focus
Yeah.
to grow? And so it's actually very freeing because this happens a lot, right? And I work with a lot of engineering folks. And so they're not fluent in the skill of creating and sharing externally. And so for them, they tend to be quite high on the credibility pillar. They're actually pretty strong in the depth of ideas pillar, but they're very low on the prolific and profile pillars. The approach to help them move up in those pillars is completely different from someone who's maybe very famous, or maybe they write a lot, they speak a lot, whatever, or they're publishing on LinkedIn a lot, but they're kind of low in depth of ideas. For low in depth of ideas, you have to give them time to research, think, codify, and then share. If they're high on depth of ideas but low in prolific and profile, you have to give them opportunities to write, speak, and share externally, and maybe you need to train them or brands need to amplify that content. As you can see, I have no judgment on being low in those. It's just a
No.
different set
Yeah.
of tactics, right? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think that's the other thing, this mindset shift that there's a right way, or there's a best. It's like, no, what are your goals, both as an individual or if you're a company looking to build thought leaders? What is your goal? Who are you working with? What are you starting with? And depending on what you're starting with and the goals you want to achieve, where do you need to focus your time and effort?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and to your point around like the tactics and strategy, it's like one can be like just like you are like incredibly successful, creating a book and putting your thoughts out. Like, but it's maybe it doesn't like hit every single bucket, but it's like no, there's like a level of depth and knowledge and everything that you can go into those various different areas. I have to ask, like prolific output. Okay, so the four are like credibility, you already mentioned, profile, prolific output, strong ideas. What does prolific output exactly mean?
Sure. So, being prolific means that you're writing, you're speaking, you're
That's
publishing,
right.
you're sharing, you are creating and sharing a lot of content in a variety of different channels and a variety of different formats. I go hard on this pillar because it's the only one that's 100% in your control,
Mm,
right? Credibility, even your question of like, how do we know you're credible? And it's like, well, step one, I've been writing and speaking, and
yeah,
when you
yeah,
listen to me, do I sound like I know what I'm talking about? If you
yeah.
ask me a question, do I have a reasonable response?
Yes, yes.
If you ask me for specific details, can I give you an example from my lived experience or,
Yeah.
the work that I've done? And the answer is yes. In general, people are like, man, you know things. Thank you, right? But they have to feel that I know what I'm talking about, right? Profile, again, this is something where it's kind of an industry and an audience thing. Same thing with depth of ideas. The market will judge whether those ideas are useful. But being prolific, sharing regularly, showing up consistently, writing long form and short form content, speaking, whether that's on podcasts or at conferences, being on at least one social media platform. I generally recommend two, and there's a variety of folks in the field who say like have a long form and a short form of everything. So LinkedIn might be your short form writing, Substack might be your long form writing kind of social media. You might do LinkedIn lives or TikTok videos as your short form video, and then maybe you do YouTube or speaking engagements as your long form kind of recorded version. But if you look at some of the smartest thinkers over time, they were very prolific. And being prolific, like all of these go together. You're not going to build your profile if you're not out there sharing your ideas. You're not going to be able to get input and testing and kind of understanding whether your ideas are strong if you're not out there. Once you're out there, people will give you feedback to then feed back into your ideas to refine them and grow them. And the more you're out there speaking and sharing and refining, the more your credibility goes up, right? So like they
Yeah,
all
yeah, yeah,
go
yeah, yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, being prolific basically means that you're sharing your ideas in a variety of different formats and channels.
And one of the things that kind of keeps going, resurfacing in my head is around like the difference between generalization and specialization, and it feels to me that thought leadership kind of is a world for specialization more so than generalization, or can you be a thought leader in say generally general thoughts around marketing as a broad umbrella, or do you in fact have to go niche? Is there a difference or does it matter?
I think it is harder to become a thought leader more generally because of that depth of ideas and just the amount of time that you have to invest. But I will note the ability to connect the different dots and the ability to pull from different industries or different ideas or different fields
Yeah.
does help you strengthen that depth of ideas. So there's an excellent book by David Epstein. It's called Range, and it actually explores this idea
Hmm.
of generalists versus specialists. And one of the analogies he uses is digging holes. And so if you're a specialist, you dig a very deep hole. You get
Yep.
all the way down in there. You're way down in there. But if you get stuck, it's very hard to climb back out of that hole when the ground or
You
gravity breaks,
committed.
right? Like you're all the way
Oh,
down, right? Like you might find the
yeah.
treasure at the very bottom, but if you get stuck, it's much harder to come out of that hole. In contrast, generalists dig a bunch of shallow holes. And so when they get stuck, they kind of just pop up and, oh, I just need to grab a pickaxe instead of a shovel. Or, oh, that person seems to be using a different digging technique. What are they doing over there, right? Or, huh, this ground is very hard. I don't want to keep digging here when that
Yeah.
person has soft ground. I'll just pop over there and dig in the soft ground,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
It's
they
a little
have
more
a lot more
nimble.
adaptability. Now,
Yeah.
will they ever find the water or the treasure or whatever it is at the very bottom of the hole? That is highly unlikely. However, they will continue to make progress. They can grab different tools, they can move around, they can learn from others much easier. And so I actually think, there's what you need as an individual or your goals as an individual. From an organization or a team standpoint, having that mix of specialists and generalists
Yes.
makes you so much stronger. And I think if you, especially in larger organizations that are potentially trying to be thought leaders across a number of different topics, that actually is very helpful for them to have that mix of specialists and generalists and that ability to connect the dots can actually lead you to some breakthrough ideas. There's another book that I love. It's called The Medici Effect, and it talks about creativity and problem solving. And one of the central ideas in that book is pulling from very random fields and like mashing ideas together
I love
until
it.
you find something that's like, this makes no sense, but it
Until it
works.
does
Like
sometimes. Yeah,
until
no.
it does, right?
Yeah.
Looking at the way the animal kingdom builds nests and ant hills and termite tunnels, and like how birds and insects don't run into each other when they fly in swarms and formations is so helpful. And we've learned a ton from that from an architecture standpoint for our buildings, radar, echolocation. Again, the way that like whales and dolphins communicate, that has influenced how humans design radios and cars and buildings as well. So, like, you would never think, what can I learn from ants about building a building? And you're like, well, look at an ant hill. It's freaking crazy, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
yeah.
phenomenal. And the fact that it still stays up. No, I totally am tracking where you're going with this because I think you can learn a lot from different industries. I feel exactly the same way. And it's like, I think it's relevant to like take and learn or like feel like go walking down the street in terms of like, I don't know, the slope of, how roads are built or whatever. Like all these random things like play into one another. And that can be applicable in other areas of life or study or whatever it may be. Um, Actually, I want to pause for one moment. So, everybody that's listening, in a couple minutes, we're actually going to go into some questions. So, I do have a number of questions that are in the chat right now. But if you have anything else that you want us to touch on, please go add it in right now, and I'll make sure that we get into them. So I anticipate, or at least one of my hopes actually getting into this conversation was that like people that either wanted to be a thought leader or were existing thought leaders and were kind of challenged maybe with like the topic or saw something like, saw something where like maybe they either wanted to dispute or kind of learn from it, would find this live event and come check it out. So from an actionable insights perspective for professionals like who want to build like real thought leadership, are there like, you have four pillars and everything, are there like four maybe easy takeaways that people can do in each of those areas, like starting this week, that like they can get started or audit their path?
Sure. So step one is create that baseline, and I'll send an article where I give some kind of proof points and tactics in each pillar. So step one, honestly score yourself to get a sense of where you need to focus. As I mentioned earlier, it's a very different problem to solve if you're low on the profile or prolific side than if you're low on the depth of idea side. So that's the first thing. Second thing, if you want to get started today, start being prolific. And a lot of people are like, but I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to get started, or I feel scared. So, obviously, Jackie and I are very biased. We love LinkedIn, and I highly recommend LinkedIn. It's a great place, especially for
Yes.
business professionals. But two prompts that I'll give you. One is a question I asked today, and then the other is a question I answered today. And you can take these in any direction you want, right? So if you're asking a question, like literally, what was the question? Was it you asked your spouse, what are we having for dinner tonight? Okay, why are you asking that? Is it because you're a working parent? Is it because you had to get up early to go to the office for an important meeting today? Okay, how did you prepare for that meeting? Why was that meeting at 6 a.m. instead of at 8 a.m.? How do you think about commuting? Does your office require return to office, or are you working from home, right? You can take that in whatever direction you want. Same thing with the question you answered today. What was the question? Why did someone ask you? How did you find the information to answer this question? What was the answer to the question, right? Like, so those are two prompts that I love. And it's something that doesn't require specific expertise or specific proof. It's your lived experience. Another tactical thing in that way, if you're concerned about being wrong, say, from my perspective, in my opinion, from my experience, based on my context. So I'm a B2B marketer in SaaS and I'm managing a team. Here's how I would solve this problem. Cool. If you're not a B2B marketer in SaaS who's managing a team, great, maybe my advice doesn't apply to you, but that doesn't mean my advice is wrong because it's based on my context, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're a solo founder trying to sell baked goods, that's a very different context and problem space than whatever I'm talking about, right? So those are a couple of super tactical things that you can start doing today. The other tactical thing in terms of starting to build that profile and starting to hone your depth of ideas, go on LinkedIn and comment on posts. You get
Yes.
1,250 characters with spaces. And I know that because I frequently run out of all 1,200 characters with spaces, right? So
I didn't
these
even know
mini
that was the
comments,
number.
yeah, that's the number. Well, I get very excited when it's exactly 1,250 and I'm like, look at me. Again, you can give yourself gold stars in a lot of ways. And when I
Yeah.
hit the exact character count, I give myself a
Amazing.
gold star. Like, good job, right? But go find these conversations and add your perspective. And again, that phrase, from my perspective, in my opinion, based on my experience, this is an interesting thought. I actually think about it a little bit differently, right? Um, that's a great way for you to start building those relationships and start getting those inputs to refine your depth of ideas. And so if you find that people are asking you the same type of questions over and over, and you find that you're articulating the same, opinion, perspective, counterpoint in the comments, that might actually be a great input for your first framework or your first one liner, right? Like one of my quippy go-to lines is the funnel is dead, use a playground instead, right? And I talk all about how to reimagine the buyer's journey instead of a linear funnel into a playground, and there's sub frameworks and the whole thing, right? So maybe you discover your quippy one liner, and then it's like, okay, well, prove it to me. How does this actually work? Tactically, what steps do you take to make this one liner true? And that can then send you down that whole path from a depth of ideas standpoint. So, those are a couple of like nitty gritty, super
I
tactical
love
ideas,
it.
and then a few that kind of like feed into building some of those other areas.
I mean, I think everybody's going to leave this conversation with like, I'm like, okay, let me not as in, but as in like, okay, I have a lot of things to think about, and I love that. Okay, so let's get into the questions. One of them that a friend of mine, she actually wasn't able to join. She did have a question. She was like, what are the biggest misconceptions people have about what it takes to be a thought leader?
So I think there's several misconceptions, particularly on the business side, the idea that only founders or only executives are thought leaders, or that they are the best thought leaders, or that you must have a big title to be a thought leader. There are a variety of other ways to have markers of credibility and to also grow your profile. So I think that's the biggest thing for thought leaders. From a differentiation standpoint, that depth of ideas is the biggest differentiator, and the market will judge your ideas regardless of your title. Yes, it is easier if you have a big title, or if you have other credentials from an education standpoint, if you've been in the industry for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever. But ultimately the ideas are the differentiator. And so I
Yeah.
think, don't feel that because you don't have an executive or founder title that, well, I'll never be a thought leader. I can only get so high until my title gets so high. You don't have to wait to put your ideas out there, to codify, to research, to share, to start publishing
Yeah.
until you have the right title.
And if I may, like, kind of rah people in the background that like are afraid to post, literally, I'm going to tell you right now that the scariest time regarding posting is right before you do it. That first time is the really the scariest time, and then afterwards you're like, whatever, keep going. I don't know if you found the same, but it's like it gets so much easier. Just do that first one. And honestly, if I were to give anybody advice, because I'd love to see more people, like everybody has something insightful to say and has a lived experience that like you have something to share that literally bury it. And what I say that is like you're going to be scared. So literally whatever your time zone is, do it at like right before you're going to bed. Just publish it, walk away, go to sleep. If you can't, I mean, I assume you, but my point being is that like in theory, if you're posting it late at night, maybe there's going to be fewer people viewing it, and then you got the first one out of the way. So just do it. So echoing what Ashley said, but yeah, get it out there. You have something to say. All right, so let me go to the questions here. So what do we got? Here. I think you're right. Peter Rost. So what's the difference between thought leader and influencer? I think you touched on that. Was it Richa Gandhi? She said, I saw a post yesterday on LinkedIn which said to be noticed, you need to be loud. So So the Fight Club idea that you let your work speak for itself might be a very Gen X and millennial centric thing. Gen Z and Gen Alpha, even though maybe some of them, like you said, are not that deep of thought leaders, but because they are loud in their approach, end up getting more visibility. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure. I have seen a lot of people say this type of thing like, oh, you have to be loud, or oh, you have to be contrarian, you have to be spicy, right? There is a difference between the volume of your voice, the spiciness, contrarian, whatever of your ideas, and visibility. And funny enough, I mean, you've got Susan Cain who literally wrote Quiet, and the power of introverts in an extrovert world. I
Yeah.
am the most extroverted. I have a very loud voice. I can command a room if I so choose. The funny thing is, I intentionally do not try to command every room I walk into because in a lot of cases, that's not what I'm there for. Maybe I'm there to learn, maybe I'm there to staff, maybe I'm just walking through, right? What I find is somehow I still end up in charge in a lot of rooms, right? And you do not have to be overtly yelling to be heard. Now, you can't just sit in the corner quietly and kind of do this number, you do have to be visible, but being loud does not necessarily make you the most visible or make you visible for the right reasons. And so I do think there is a balance. You do have to show up, you do have to put yourself out there, but I find that when you are showing up authentically with intelligence, putting smart work and hard work out into the world, people do find you. So it is a balance of like raising your hand, showing up, being consistent and not hiding, but just shouting is not I would suggest that whatever is being noted in that post of being loud is not necessarily saying you need to just shout all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, and even especially in a professional setting, I think one of the key things, even for anybody that is a thought leader and is, say, a little bit more of an extroverted thought leader, I think your role also is to make sure that you allow space for other voices that aren't necessarily going to be so loud or overt or whatnot. And I think that can look a multitude of different ways, but I think the really good leaders allow for that. And, actually, yeah, to your point, you're like, I know who I am. You're like, I need other voices because I don't know, it gets tiring listening to yourself talk, but also like great ideas come from so many different places and auditing your ideas, like you can actually build upon it. So, all
Well,
right,
and I'll
here,
say too, there's a difference between constantly patting yourself on the back, like the comment of like first rule of Fight Club is don't talk about Fight Club, right?
yeah,
But there are signs. They're all walking around with bloodied faces, right? Same type of thing. I don't need to go around calling I constantly dispute the idea that I am a thought leader on thought leadership. And every time the person who asked me that is like, "Well, I think you are. I think you are." I don't have to declare myself that, right?
yeah,
Like and even me saying that comment, it's like, see, you do think you're a thought leader. I'm like, no, I literally just told you based on my own framework that I'm not. But so there's also this element where it is a little funny where I'm like, the most cringy thing is running around declaring yourself a thought leader.
yeah,
Even if you don't declare yourself a thought leader, other people have eyes and ears, they can see it. And so
yeah.
it's a really
You're like,
interesting
whether
balance.
you like it or not, it's happening.
Yeah,
But like,
yeah,
like the
feel
quote,
it.
like perception is reality to some degree, and it's like I think it's really helpful to like fine tune the perception that you leave upon other
Yes.
people. And it's like, I mean, if anything, you walk to your point, like you walk into a room, you end up being getting in charge of whatever it may be. It's like people respect you, they value your input, and like whatever, however you self identify on this is like irrelevant to like what's actually happening on the day to day. Like people
Yep.
respect you clearly.
Yeah.
All right, so Dr. Deepak, I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher Butra. Apologies. One thing I noticed is that the influencer style is bleeding into LinkedIn. Thought leadership is shared while sipping a cocktail at a leadership retreat on a beach in a swimsuit. I kid you not. And it has like 3K likes and shares. Right below is a real thought leader who died at like 50 likes. My only hope is that likes do not equal revenue, but this is still a leading indicator of something, right? Question mark. More of a comment than a question, but I mean, do you want to respond to it?
Sure. So I do differentiate, and I talk about this a lot more in the book. And I also talk about this quite a bit on LinkedIn about the difference between influencers, subject matter experts, and thought leaders. Individuals can make a lot of money being any one of those three.
Hmm.
Companies can make a lot of money leveraging those in any one of those three. And so the real issue is, again, what you are actually making money on. Yes, a lot of people want this lifestyle of like sipping Mai Tais on the beach and like I'm doing business and whatever, right? One interesting thing, because a lot of people ask me, especially with the book coming out, if I'm going to quit my job and am I trying to be an author and a speaker and am I gonna, go out on my own? Am I doing consulting? And the answer is at this point, no. I like being an in-house marketer. The challenges that I solve as an in-house marketer significantly influence the work that I put out into the world from a speaking and writing and social media standpoint, right? However, I do end up talking to a lot of people who have gone freelance or consulting or gone out of their own. And many of them have big followings. Many of them are making a great living. But in many cases, I have talked about the numbers and they are not making millions of dollars, right? Like
No.
you see folks like Mr. Beast or Joe Rogan or, Charlie XCX or, whoever, right? Um, those people are outliers in the same way that any traditional business that is, becoming a billionaire or whatever it is also an outlier. And I think that people do see the difference between the Mai Tais on the beach and being like, I want to live that lifestyle. And these ideas and the person putting them out there are significantly shifting how I do business, how the industry works. And like, yes, there is always going to be someone who outshines, the real person, right? Like the world is not a fair place. Um, but I think that the whole like the arc of time in the long run bends towards justice, right? I think that the arc of ideas bends towards being smart and being able to have an impact, whether that's money, whether that's being well known, whether that's being amplified. I do think that ultimately, smart ideas do rise to the top. Now, we can have a whole discussion separately about the problems with misinformation, disinformation, all of that, virality of the wrong ideas. I think the unfortunate part is it is very hard. It is very easy to end up in your own echo chamber, and it is very hard to look across at someone else and say, there are a lot of people who think that idea is the right idea. I think it's the wrong idea, but the market thinks it's the right idea. And so it is very hard. And again, that goes back to the code of ethics and particularly in the age of AI and really having first principles and standards of the hypothesis, testing results, controlled environments, understanding what is fact versus opinion and the stakes of the outcomes of believing or implementing certain advice.
There's something that you said earlier that like made me think that I feel like companies are completely messing up an opportunity to celebrate and amplify people like yourself at Atlassian, where like honestly, would I have even said, that company name as many times as I have today or even thought about it? No, but it's because I'm talking to you. I feel like if there are business owners on here that are listening, I fully want to implore you to leverage like people to like, to highlight their own brand and their expertise, because it's like I do think it amplifies the depth of quality of individuals within an organization. So it's like, I mean, you whether it's subject matter experts, whatever it was, whether it's thought leaders, it's like let your team shine and encourage that, because there's so many companies that I feel like are discouraging it. I'm like, what a short-sighted view, in my opinion. Okay, here we go. Let's go back. Let me Sorry. Okay, here we go. Blair Williamson. How do you utilize the framework for a company who wants to be a thought leader, i.e., you are tasked with it for the company and have a hard time finding internal thought leaders who appeal to our ideal customer profile?
So I get this question a lot because it is hard. There's the perception that like, oh, it just has to be a founder exec, but they're busy or they're not good on camera or they hate writing, or in some cases it's like they just don't have anything interesting to say. So like, what do we do? So there's a couple of ways to do this. One is to basically say like, this is the story we want to tell. This is the opinion and perspective that we want to put forward as a company. And then you basically find whoever is the person who is willing to tell that story, and then you build up that person. On the flip side, you do what you just said, Jackie, of like find the people who are already sharing, who are already out there, and then help shape their story in a way that is beneficial to the company. Or, if they are in a relevant problem space and solution space, then amplifying their story and, kind of putting that out there as the company. Um, I will caution as well, again, going back to the goals, if your goal is like, well, we need to sell more products, great. That's not thought leadership, that's sales. And a lot of people are like, oh, we need to do quality content, thought leadership. All of your content should be quality, including your sales content, right? Sales is not a dirty word. Thought leadership does not mean quality content. Like those two words are not interchangeable. So
Yeah.
I'll dispel that myth. Um, if you truly have no one who is willing and able to think smart thoughts, codify those, put them out, say them in a way that resonates with your target audience, then it might make more sense for you to hire influencers. And it might make more sense for you to go down that path, again, depending on what your goals are. If the goals are, well, we needed to have a stake and a point of view in the market, yeah, you have to do that. I mean, you can't buy it, you can't fake it, you can't have marketing write it down and put it out there after it goes through 10 rounds of legal and PR and marketing review.
Boring.
There's no POV there. I don't know what to tell. Like, I'm sorry, but if you have no hypothesis and you have no research and you have no framework and you have no action and you have no spokesperson, you have none of the ingredients for a thought leader, right? If the answer is, well, we just want to sell products to a new audience, great. Influencers can help you do that. Go
Yeah.
hire them. But if you
Yeah.
genuinely want to have a point of view, you want to, you fundamentally believe that the way the industry approaches the problem or solution needs to change, then like, yeah, you got to do that work. And you, as the marketer, do have to go look in your Slack channels, look on your whiteboards. In our case, obviously we have Confluence. I troll Confluence a lot to be like, what's going on over here and over there, right? Like, what are the engineers doing? What are my fellow marketers doing? What are the designers doing, right? Go look for that, and you'll start to see certain names pop up frequently, or go listen in on the different town halls. Like basically, you need to kind of spy on your coworkers a little bit, so you can be like, what are these ideas, right? And I say, sometimes I say that, I'm like, you should spy on your coworkers, and people are like, that's Big Brother and it's terrible. And I'm like, how else are you going to know what they're talking about and what they're doing? Like, you got to lurk a little. So go lurk in Slack, go lurk on Confluence, whatever your wiki is, again, go lurk in these places, and you'll start to see, okay, who are the smart people who maybe just need a marketer to pair with them to help with some of the content creation and distribution because they're not fluent in that skill set.
Yeah. I think people are afraid, but you're like, you've been doing this for 20 years. Like, you have a lot of information. Like, we just need to get it out. But like, sometimes I think people take it for granted. Like, I don't have anything to say. I'm like, I guarantee you do. You absolutely do. So Jay Brown actually has a question. She's actually going to be one of my moderators at the Idea Citizen Summit. I'm super excited. So she's asking your opinion on some of these people I'm going to name, if they are specialists or generous. Ariana Huffington, Oprah Winfrey, Elon Musk, non-political, Brene Brown, Barack Obama, and then there was Fareed Zakaria. I don't know who that is.
That is a big list of names in a bunch of different industries.
Yes.
So in general, I bound my framework to say that it is primarily focused on like knowledge workers. Obviously, Elon Musk is a business person. I generally don't apply this framework to, musicians, sports stars, other celebrities, or famous people. One thing that's particularly interesting about a lot of the folks on that list, they rose to prominence through other means. If you are the president of the United States, like 100% you are well known, um, and 100% you have influence over the entire world. Whether you have smart ideas is a separate question. Whether those ideas um, are, original and disruptive and help people think and act in a new direction is a different question, right? Um, Same thing, obviously, Oprah Winfrey. She rose to prominence primarily through, TV. She obviously runs a lot of very successful businesses. How many of the ideas and businesses that she runs are her own versus, I mean, again, Oprah's book club? She is not writing any of those books. She's lending her influence to those authors. So I feel like it's a very large list of folks that and Fareed Zakaria, I know the name, but I actually am like that name rings a bell to me, but I actually am unclear. I don't remember. If I remember, I think they're a medical commentator, a medical expert for like New York Times or CNN or something like that, right? Like the name rings a bell, but I am actually not
That's
100%
exactly what it is. Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
about their field of expertise. So I think you have to evaluate it on an individual basis, and I actually don't know how useful that is for the majority of the folks in this audience. People tend to say like, I'm going to go after somebody that's 20 steps ahead, and it's like, okay, maybe pick somebody who's 2 steps ahead where you can actually learn from them and follow in their footsteps. But I would say, we would have to evaluate each of those people again. Brene Brown and Barack Obama, like you're not you're not talking about the same situation between those two people. Oprah Winfrey and Elon Musk, not talking about the same situation between those two. So I would say you'd have to kind of take them on a different. You have to approach them each as their own person.
All right, two more questions, I think, and I think that's perfect. Okay, here we go. From Jason Jackson, is there a thought leader association, an accredited path, or organization that awards folks that meet standard criteria?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
I got that. I'm like, nope.
Yeah. Okay. And then last question from Richard Gandhi, who is it is sometimes overwhelming to watch the next gen kids have a big following on TikTok. So, to Dr. Deepak Brutta's point, it has started feeling a lot more like influencer social media platform on here on LinkedIn as well. And sometimes it feels like there is no way to match up. How do you overcome this feeling?
I guess I will reiterate that a big following does not necessarily equal success. And I use the word success, not money, because you might have different goals. Um, Obviously, I'm a business person. I work for money. I do a lot of things. I think money is definitely a huge marker of success. Um, how much money that large following is making is variable. And particularly if you are more senior in your career in SaaS, you are likely making more money than the kids these days. Um, and I will note that while you think that you are coming into the arena with them with fewer skills or the fewer weapons, like if we're thinking like it's a coliseum, right? The reality is they are looking at their peers and thinking that they are coming into the arena underprepared, not in shape, without the weapons, right? um, all of us are competing in different arenas and in different ways. In terms of overcoming that feeling, I would say, again, go back to what are your goals? Are you happy with your life and your success? When I start looking around at other people and saying, man, they have more followers than me, or oh man, their content is doing better than my content based on the likes and the reactions. The reality is that something is probably, I have some dissatisfaction in my own life. And that is something that I can control. I can't control how many followers they have. I can't control whether their content goes viral. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes to make that content grow or know what their success is. Oh, maybe they're getting paid tens of thousands of dollars.
Maybe they're
Okay,
not.
well, how much money am I making in my job? Is my
Yeah.
is my job paying me enough? Yes. Then like why do I care if somebody else is making tens of thousands of dollars by putting their time and effort into LinkedIn or TikTok versus putting their time into a company, right? So that would be my recommendation is like understand that the arena is different, the success metrics are different, and it is within your control to also build your audience and to also enter that arena if that's the space you want to play in. Um, but I would caution against focusing on, this one particular cohort and saying, "Oh no, they're doing better than me or I'll never catch up." There are a lot of ways to grow, be successful, and a lot of arenas, and I guarantee you they are looking at their peers or at you and being like, "I will never catch up." So, somebody is always going to be doing better, and I say this like I point at myself to be like, "You're not failing, right? Like you're not falling
Yes.
behind."
Yes.
But that's my advice on that. That's more life advice than it is, LinkedIn growth advice.
Is there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave the audience with?
I think the final thoughts are connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to spar on some ideas or you need somebody to engage on your posts so that you feel like you're like, okay, I'm not shouting into the void. Like, please connect with me. I love making new connections, new friends, new colleagues. So yeah, please join me on LinkedIn. And obviously, if you would like to learn more about this, buy the book, Human Centered Marketing: How to Connect with Audiences in the Age of AI.
And I'd love to invite everybody to join future Idea Citizen events. We have a number of different live events coming up. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. Join the Idea Citizen LinkedIn group and share this episode with a friend.